Hi, I'm Jack Mulder. I teach philosophy at Hope College in Holland, Michigan.
I'm Bertha Alvarez-Manninen, and I teach philosophy at Arizona State University. Uh,
And I think
so,
that's, yeah, so we're going to get started talking a little bit about the abortion issue, and especially I think we should talk a bit about your book, Bertha. I was wondering, could you tell, everybody a little bit about why, what some of the main lines in your book are, and maybe especially a little bit about that first chapter, because I really found that great. So.
well, the primary motivation for writing the book is that because you went to grad school with me, that I've been pro-choice for quite a while, but was pro-choice basically on the grounds that I didn't think fetuses had rights, I didn't think fetuses were persons, and that was radically challenged for me when I had children, when I became pregnant, and as I've read, actually often tends to happen, and so I could not continue in good conscience to continue being pro-choice without being taking seriously the idea that fetuses may very well be persons, definitely human beings, definitely alive, quite possibly persons. What does that do to a pro-choice perspective? And so my book is an attempt to argue how you can simultaneously be pro-choice, but still think that fetal life is worthy of respect and reverence to some degree, and how to combine those views. And one of the reasons that I wanted to dialogue with you in particular is because for years you've been one of my primary antagonists, but in an extremely reasonable, respectful, and quite frankly admirable way.
Well, that's kind of you. Likewise, I feel the same way.
So you wanted to talk about the first chapter because that's the one where I say that, philosophically speaking, the arguments for Roe v. Wade don't work. Is that the one you wanted to focus on?
I read that chapter and found it really interesting for how it would probably hit some buttons for people on both sides of the issue. So I wonder different kinds of buttons, but maybe can you just for getting us started and everything, because I guess I'm the other end of this a little bit. What's your reason for why you think Roe's argument fails? That's the title of the chapter, right?
Right, that's right. Well, because if you read the decision closely, the judges rely on a type of interpretation of privacy, a type of interpretation of procreative liberty, right? And I don't want to dispute the fact that there is such a thing as procreative liberty, right? I don't think that you can be forced to have children. I don't think you can be forced to not have children, right? So it's not the procreative liberty that I have a problem with. It's the idea that it applies as easily to abortion rights as the judges seem to think it does, because their arguments are, I can't remember off the top of my head, but all the reasons that they gave for why a woman would have an interest in abortion rights are interests about, child rearing is difficult, and it is. Child rearing can exact financial, emotional distress when not taken on voluntarily, which it does, and so on and so forth. And actually, they pretty much almost outright rejected going through a bodily autonomy route, which I thought was interesting because that's the one that works. And so in the first book, in the first chapter, look, none of these things apply if fetuses are persons, right? I mean, if I'm under current financial distress, I can't just off my children, right? They have rights. Sure. And so the idea that you can get an abortion on the grounds that being a parent presents to it all these social difficulties only works if fetuses aren't persons and don't have rights. And precisely the court says, hey, but we don't need to talk about that. Yes, you do. You have to talk about that. Without figuring that out, your argument doesn't work. And so the argument doesn't work. It doesn't work unless they present an argument as to why fetuses are and they do say things like, historically fetuses are considered persons. Okay, well, but at least philosophically that's not good enough, because historically blacks were considered persons, right? Women were considered persons, so that's not good enough, at least philosophically. Maybe if appealing to precedent, right? But philosophically, it doesn't work. Because Roe's argument stands or falls on whether or not fetuses are persons, I don't think it works until we decide that. And moreover, from a pro-choice perspective, why is this concerning? Well, because if you take seriously the fact that there have been states trying to pass these personhood amendments, if one is successful and takes it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they look at the logic, they're like, well, if it's a person, then Roe doesn't apply anymore. That's the end of abortion rights as we know it, right? So I think it's important to, if you're going to be pro-choice, to try to formulate an argument that does not rely on denying fetuses persons, at least for practical reasons and moral reasons as well.
Yeah, and one of the things you point out there is that if you're talking about, and I think it might have been in your book, but it might have been elsewhere too. If you frame the issue in terms of procreative liberty, then that term itself seems to have a particular view on the matter, namely that you haven't yet succeeded in procreating.
In procreating, correct.
Right. And so that's, I mean, if that's the way you're going to cash the issue out, then yeah, I mean, it seems like it's already assuming that the fetus is not a person, right, in the decision. So if that's the case, then that argument might very well not work if it's intended, or if it ultimately rests on a premise that they're just not clarifying.
Right. Like procreative liberty vis-a-vis destroying life only applies if that life has no rights.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I'd rather not argue. If we're going to have an argument in favor of abortion rights, I'd rather it not be something that depends on taking away fetal personhood or fetal rights.
Okay. Right. So what is the argument?
Oh, you know the argument. So Thompson is like the Judith Jarvis Thompson, right? A defense of abortion, which is, I think, it's definitely infamous, right? And I think gets it pretty right. And I actually think gets it more right than she herself thought it did, right? And moreover, I actually think something that isn't talked about a lot is that her argument not only, I think, opens the door for arguing in favor of abortion rights pretty robustly, I think it actually also opens the door to this language of respect and decency when it comes to abortion that she sort of touches on but didn't really develop, and I like to develop that because I think that's important. And I think it just comes down to the issue, not just, I mean, forget just abortion in particular. It just comes down to the issue that even if we grant anybody, so I tell my students, all of you in this classroom have a right to life. No one's going to come in here and contest that. No one's going to come in here and contest your personhood or your worth or anything like that. But it still is the case, right, that right has certain limitations, right? It doesn't entitle you to every single thing necessary to keep you alive. And one thing that it doesn't entitle you to do is to compel someone else to use their body to sustain you, right? So you don't have a right to my blood, you don't have a right to my bone marrow or my organs. I can voluntarily give it to you, and perhaps this is where you and I can dialogue. I should, in some sense, give it to you, right? But can you be compelled, at least by law or by moral obligation to do it? No, I don't think you can, right? Every time I go give blood, I'm always told that, the second you feel dizzy, let us know and we'll stop. And even if that means you don't get the donation done, right? Even if that means you don't help out someone, you are the sole arbitrator of how long you want that donation to continue because it's your body and your health. And I just don't see how that doesn't equally apply to abortion rights, right? In particular, given that pregnancy is so much more physically, emotionally, and health-wise demanding than any of those things, and bone marrow donation, blood donation. So if we can't compel a comparatively minor bodily infraction to save lives, I don't think you can compel a huge bodily infraction to save lives, even if it's a life that has moral status and worth. And I've always told you, I've been telling you for years that if you can convince me that that's not right, I'm probably ready to that close to going to your side, right? I think they're utilitarian concerns I have as well, but
Yeah, so I mean, maybe we should talk a little bit about this, like what respect entails here, right?
Yeah.
Because, um, I mean, so Thompson's argument, I take it, is an argument that wants to say that, uh, you know, if only for the sake of argument, let's just grant that the fetus is a person, right? I
Right.
mean, she does only for the sake of argument grant that the
Right.
fetus
Right.
is a
Right.
person, but suppose that it were, right? Then still she wants to say we're not at burden to extend the right to life so far that the fetus has a claim on being given everything it needs for sustaining its life and that kind of thing, right?
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, and so and I guess what I want to explore a little bit here is that for me, if we really do grant that the fetus is a person, right? Which of course I'm willing to grant because I think it's true. Then I mean, we have to think about the nature of the relationship because I mean, now you're talking about two persons, right?
Right.
Both of whom are in vulnerable states, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, you know, and you know, when the fetus is not viable at any rate, right? I mean, it's not merely a matter of inducing labor or something like that. When the fetus is not viable, then the abortion is an action taken upon it, right? And so you know, from the sort of pro-choice perspective, we need an argument for well, I mean, the argument I take it is that we are in a position to autonomy. She can take direct action against the fetus in the manner of ending its life, killing it,
Right.
right? And so again, right? I mean, it, the world just shakes out so that it's an interesting place in this regard, right? Pregnancy turns out to be a relationship, I think, in which the lives of two people are intertwined and both could in principle be imperiled, right, at a certain point, right? And so you just gotta, we need to figure out, okay, uh, is it permissible for one to take direct action against the other in order for some kind of and I don't think that's the way to go, right? It seems to me that you know it's the kind of direct action that from a kind of non-consequentialist perspective, I think is not permitted, right? And again, right, there's something unique about this relationship, yes, right? There's something, again, nature just works out this way that you know some difficult decisions are offered us, but at the same time, I'm just not convinced that you can take direct action against the fetus, right? If it's a person, and again, I think it is.
Right.
So,
So here's Thompson makes this distinction, which I actually think is pretty spot on, and I defend in the book that the right to an abortion should always be interpreted as a right to, in a sense, retract bodily aid, and not to be interpreted as a right to kill the fetus, so that if the two are separate, if it's possible to separate the two, you have no additional right to kill the fetus, right? And to me, there's a lot of authors that have really come down hard on her for that, right? And I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. If it's possible to remove the fetus from your body in a way that keeps it alive, I think that you should probably take that route. All things being equal, right? Unless doing so presents an incredible health hazard to the woman or something like that. But practically speaking, I don't. For example, if a fetus survives abortion, I think there's a moral responsibility to resuscitate and care for that fetus like if it were an infant. Um, uh, and so I don't know. I don't think that appeases would appease your concerns, but she does at least try to draw a distinction that you shouldn't interpret the right to an abortion as a right to kill. And
Right.
that sort of seems right, and that sort of seems comparable to, again, other issues of bodily autonomy, right? I have a right to say, deny you access to my bone marrow, even if that means you're going to die, but I don't have a right to shoot you in the head if it turns out you can survive without my bone marrow, right?
Sure.
That seems right to me, um, but I don't think that necessarily will appease all of your concerns. Right?
Yeah, I mean it's tricky because you know, I mean we could talk about, a rare case of something like, an ectopic pregnancy
Right.
where, the embryo is lodged, say, in the fallopian tube, right? And, it's not going to make any passage from the fallopian tube without rupturing the tube, and this could,
Hmm.
could even kill the woman, right? And so both are just directly imperiled at that point, right? And I mean, at that point, I would want to appeal to things like, double effect type
Right.
concerns by saying things like,
Right.
well, if what we want to do here is merely, right, you know, uh, you know, remove the health risk, the deadly risk to both, right, persons in the equation, then what we could do, right, is remove that portion of the tube, right, through a salpingectomy or something like that, right,
Hmm.
so as to kind of not directly, kill the fetus, kill the embryo, but in this case, to remove the direct health risk to the woman, right? Similarly, with something like, a cancerous uterus or something
Right.
like
Right.
that, where, so again, if there's a direct threat to both persons in this case, right, then there are ways to, appeal to some ways of thinking about double effect and that kind of thing that can help us think through these cases, I think. But at the same time, right, you know, when those aren't the direct threats at issue, right, then I think it gets more difficult, right? And I think, well, I mean, it's obviously those are difficult cases to begin with, but I mean, but I'm not persuaded that. Um, you know, what you can do is simply, withdraw aid, right? If you know that the direct result of that
Right.
is going to be the death of the fetus, right? And, of course, some abortions are more than directly, right? Or more than simply withdrawing aid. But I mean, that's a less sort of philosophical point. But so I think those are some concerns. I mean, you've you've used the bone marrow case
Right.
to a large extent. I mean, maybe we should talk a little bit about that.
Well, I just think, I mean, we've both talked about how there's absolutely no other case that is completely analogous to pregnancy, right? Which I agree with completely. But I
Yeah, I think
think,
it brings some unique features.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I think the bone marrow case is the best you can do,
Okay.
right, for now. Because at least a lot of the similarities that make abortion difficult are presented here as well, right? So you have a case of a man, the McFall versus Shimp case. You have a case of a man who has aplastic anemia. He's dying. He needs a bone marrow transplant. His cousin is a match, and his cousin at first goes through the testing because you need to find out you're a match, and then he changes his mind and says he doesn't want to do it.
Hmm.
Um, and then McFall takes him to court to try to get him compel him to do it. And so here are the similarities, right? You have two people with two vulnerable individuals that have a right to life and that stand to die without this aid. You have the fetus and you have McFall, and you have this other individual, the woman or Shimp, who is required to use their body to sustain that person in some way. And I actually think that the woman I know the woman is required to use the body in far more physically intimate and burdensome ways in a bone marrow transplant, right? And that's a case that I make, is that, well, the court said we can't do this. We can't take Chimp, throw him down on a gurney, force him down, and remove his bone marrow. We cannot do. And I don't see how that's relevantly dissimilar to what we would require of women by compelling them to stay pregnant, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I wonder if you'd have the good humor to entertain me for just a couple of minutes while I mean, look, I think I've got three things I want to say on that.
All right, all right.
I can try to keep them short.
Only
Right?
three? Only three? All right, go for it. Go for it.
I'll try to keep it short. But okay,
All right.
so the first thing I want to say is that I do think there's a distinction between the relationship that McFall and Shimp are in over against the relationship that the pregnant mother and the fetus, the unborn child, whatever you want to use there, are in. And it seems to me that you can talk about it by saying that if McFall, who I think is the agent, right? Isn't Shimp the one who needs the bone marrow? Is that right?
No, McFall's the one that needs the bone marrow.
Okay, well,
Okay.
okay, so the donee, right, Shimp or whoever it is, right, the one who needs to donate the bone marrow, right, is, um, uh, he's in a position, in this case it's he, right, who, um, is being asked to take a positive action to help someone, right, who needs, life-sustaining assistance, right, but hasn't yet isn't yet in a situation where that life-sustaining assistance is being drawn on him, right? I do think there's a relevant distinction. I'm not sure that it can do all the work that I think people want it to do, but I think there's a relevant distinction between that and the pregnant mother and the fetus, because the only way the the mother can end this relationship of dependency is by taking a positive action against the fetus, because that relationship is already in place, right? And so you can't just say, well, I'd like not to enter that relationship, because that relationship of dependency is already established.
Right.
The second thing I want to say is that uh, I'm kind of willing to think a little more radically about this too,
Yeah.
which is to say that I'm willing to kind of entertain, right, the idea that when a society is in a position to determine that someone is sufficiently unique, right, so as to be very uniquely qualified for giving aid of a life-sustaining sort to another of its members, right, then we might need to have an interesting conversation about how far, what kind of decency in as Thompson uses the word decency, what kind of decency we can actually, as a society, call forth from our members for the sake of
Right.
the other members of society. There are countries that have very, very rigorous systems of compulsory military service. I mean, I need
Right.
to register with selective service, right? There are things that we're required to do, right? And it would be interesting to figure out where that line is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not necessarily persuaded that I don't have at least some obligation to offer, my blood and bone marrow, or at least I couldn't I could imagine a society constructed in such a way that it might be in a position to call that kind of life-sustaining aid from me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other thing I might want to say is that just that I'm not sure that I do think there's a distinction between strapping someone down and forcibly removing that kind of life-sustaining, you know, assistance from him or her, right? Uh, and asserting that it's required in assessing, right, that kind of what denial of it, right, legally, right. I'm not necessarily prepared to say what kind of punishment there should be, but I mean, think about how we regard conscientious objectors, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they're, okay, fine. There's not a particular here's a person, let's say, who in a particular sort of just conflict, right, wishes to conscientiously object, or maybe just I mean, some conscientious objectors who have a long documented history of this, we might be willing to take seriously on this. But then again, I mean, some might just wish merely, not on principled grounds, but merely, right, to not help, right, for no good moral reason at all, right, and that's not to say that, I mean, it's not to say that there's no good moral reasons for, I mean, I'm not saying every case applies here. I'm just saying that
Right.
let's have that conversation
Mm-hmm.
about what kind of life-sustaining aid society is in a position to
To
expect
require.
of its members. Yeah. I'm just kind of
So,
interested in that.
the couple things about the first one. So, let's take the bone marrow and like give it a science fiction twist, right?
Okay.
So let's say that, I mean, this is not how bone marrow works, but let's say that this is how it works. Let's say that if you were in need of my bone marrow or vice versa, and there's some sort of like some tube that's connecting us, right, and sort of taking my bone marrow and sucking it up to you. Uh,
Okay, and this. Okay, what's okay? Start the case over a little bit. So, like,
so
the science fiction thing is what?
you're in need of my bone marrow, and the way
Okay,
the way that this society promotes transplants is that they lie the donee and the donor next to each other, and they connect like some sort of tube in between them,
and
right?
there's no sort of kind of process where they kind of say, hey, you're being called upon to do this, and you need to
Well, no,
get down to the.
let's say to a certain extent, I initially agree. Yeah, I'm gonna do this for Jack, right?
Okay.
And so they hook us up, whatever. It seems to me, and again, I don't know if this is right, that according to your distinction, that a positive action is morally worse than not starting an action, that I would be required, it would be impermissible for me to yank that tube off of you at any point during the donation, right? Because that's positive action, right? Yanking the tube, especially since the tube, it's going to result in you dying, let's say, almost instantaneously. Um,
Well, I mean, okay, so you're kind of I mean, it's a bit the frontal assault in the sense that I may be okay. So yeah, I mean, like we I
that's
kind
the
of
validest example, right? That's
no
not
no
me.
no yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I mean there
right.
there's ways in which, right, I mean there are ways I think to finesse some of the other cases, but I might be I might be willing to say that there are some very particular cases, right, where you know some in, it might be morally not on the up and up, right, to just sever that relationship of dependency, right, in the manner of killing the person, right, you know, but there would be quite unjust ways of forcing a person into that relationship in the
Right.
first
That's right.
place,
That's right.
right, that should be taken into account, right,
Right.
from the perspective of, moral obligation and
Right.
justice, right, on that front. I'm not
But
necessarily, yeah, okay, go ahead.
that's why I'm willing to give that I voluntarily initiated the donation, right? Just to at least go that far. It
Okay,
was
so
complete. I
yeah,
voluntarily initiated the donation. Halfway through it, I said I don't want to do it anymore. Let me go.
mhm.
And letting go by that means unplugging myself from you and you dying almost instantaneously. Heaven forbid, right? Um, it seems to me you'd be required to say that that's impermissible. That's a positive action. Once and the dependency relationship has begun by my voluntary actions, right? I'm trying to give you as much as possible. Um,
Yeah, so if the relationship of dependency has been established through
Right.
voluntary means,
Right.
and and uh, the relationship is such that the need is so dire,
Right.
uh, and you are so unique as a
Right.
donee that it's
Only you can do it.
that only you can do it, or if not only you, you're the only person within reasonable proximity and
Right.
availability, right?
Right. Right.
That can do it, and you've chosen to take upon yourself the relationship of dependency, and you now exist in that relationship of providing aid to the patient, right? And you choose to end that relationship at grave peril to the person to whom you're donating this life-sustaining aid, and you know that it's grave, and you know you have no particular good reason for doing it. You just wish to stop,
Right
right?
there.
Well, let's talk.
That's the problematic part,
Okay,
right?
good, but
That's
let's talk about
right.
that,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm just saying that there are circumstances in which I think it could be morally wrong to sever that relationship of dependency if you know the person is in severe, that is, in grave harm,
So see, I
in
think
danger of grave harm. Yeah.
I don't necessarily disagree, and I think this is it's important to draw a distinction over what can be compelled, and this is where I think Thompson has a good idea that she doesn't flourish out sufficiently, and I think other philosophers like Hersthouse does, and I try to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are definitely situations in which it would be immoral for you to
Mm-hmm.
sever that connection. I completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that applies to abortion as well,
Okay.
right? But I think that's a separate question. Then, is this something that can be compelled? Which is in the end what an abortion rights question is. Do I have a right to get an abortion? If your answer is no, that means then you are in a situation where you can be compelled by the state to do this, right? And I don't think that I can be forced to stay in that connection with that bone marrow person. Um, I don't think I can be compelled to do that. Now, it has to. In the end, it has to be my decision. Now, can that decision have dimensions of it that it's morally reprehensible? Yes, right. And I go into that in the book. I do think there are some instances of abortion that are morally reprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a different question than is this something that can be forced upon a woman? And I still think the answer to that is no, it can't. It can't be forced to happen.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think so where I join back on that, I think, is to say a little bit about, let's talk about, so you use the term compelled, right?
Right.
And I want to talk about the mechanisms of that compulsion. Uh,
Okay.
okay, so like what does it look like in a concrete case where you know um, someone wishes to end that relationship, right? Well, okay, I mean, I guess in I don't know. I mean, it's gonna. I mean, it would take me some work to think this out a little bit, but I mean, I think some of the things I might want to know about are, okay, so let's say you remove yourself from this person, right? And again, the relationship is so unique and this very tightly bound case, right? It's not just any old thing, right? It's not just donating a pint of blood. It's a
Right.
very tight case, right?
Right. Right.
Where you're the only person, right, who can reasonably give this assistance, and the instant you no longer provide this assistance, the person just dies, and you've voluntarily chosen to enter this relationship. Um, Now, I think, okay, so morally, I think that that might be reprehensible. Now, you're concerned about compulsion, right? And I'm interested in talking a little bit about what kinds of mechanisms are brought to bear to talk about being compelled here, right? Because it seems to me that, I mean, we tend to think that, you're in a position to withdraw yourself from the hospital, right? In this case,
Mm-hmm.
you might be able to withdraw yourself. I mean, we can all picture our favorite TV scene in which, some patient just sort of thrusts aside his, equipment or whatever, his IV and
Right.
stuff like this, right? Um, you know, and um, and I guess what I'm interested in is okay, like, I don't picture the law sort of throwing you back down on the hospital bed. I don't picture the sort of anyone sort of physically maneuvering you around, right, necessarily, but I do picture, right, a kind of, why did you do that? What were the reasons, right? Didn't we have good grounds to expect that you were going to, as a society, voluntarily offer this kind of assistance to the person that you agreed to offer it to, right? How should we assess that decision as a society?
Well,
Right? And I'm not prepared to say exactly what the kind of punitive outcome of that is, but it does seem to me that society might be in a position to wonder, right? And even to say, no, we had a reason to expect that of you, right?
see, that goes. I mean, if we're going to be really, I mean, if we're going to be honest, and we're talking about abortion here. I mean, the only comparable thing that could be talked about is do we have a reasonable expectation that voluntarily engaging in intercourse is at least a tacit consent to gestating?
Well, now,
And it's not at all clear to me that's the case, right?
well, no, I'm with you on that, but I mean,
Right.
in the sense that uh, yeah, I mean, I think that's an important consideration. Um, but then I think the debate shifts a little bit.
Right.
So are you? I mean, so yeah, I mean, so I've just now the case that you've given me, I've been evaluating, on the basis of the fact that okay, this relationship was sort of, generated, right, by voluntarily by the person,
Right.
right? And I thought society might be in a position if the case is very tightly wound and you're very unique in the assistance that you and only
Right.
you
Right.
can
Right.
provide, then I think I think the society might be in a position to expect you to continue giving that aid, right? Now, when you say that it's not a voluntary relationship, then I think things get more interesting and
No.
different.
Well.
So
Well. Well. Wait. Wait. I just want to be clear. So, like, I don't agree that the voluntary aspect is solely confined to the initial decision, right? Talking, about going back to the bone marrow, right? Um, I think that at any point within that, because you're the one that is being, for lack of a better word, this is not the right word, but intruded upon. Although it's not the right word because if you volunteered, you can argue that it's not an intrusion, right? But for lack of a better word, let's say, because your body is the one that's being used, um, it's only that you can only expect that continuing relationship for as long as you continue to volunteer to it. And so, no, I do think that at any point in time, you have the complete right to say, stop, I'm done. Now, is it always decent to do that? No, I don't, right? And I think, and I mean, we could probably have that discussion because I actually think, going back to abortion, that is where the discussion needs to take place. But I disagree with you. I don't think it takes just one instance of voluntary for then society to expect this continued voluntary relationship. I think that voluntary relationship subsists because at every point in time you continue to volunteer it. So at some point when you say no more, then that's it. No more. I'm done.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and so yeah, I see where you're coming from on that, but
Right.
I what I would want to say is that there is a moment when the nature of the relationship changes, right? You're still in a position to have the metaphysical capacity to make choices on this front, right?
Right. Right.
But now the nature of your relationship is such that um, any discrete action in which you end this relationship of dependency is a direct threat to this person you agreed to support, right?
As is not
And
initiating it. Not initiating it was a direct threat to the person as well. I mean, McFall died in 2 weeks.
I don't think it's a direct threat in the same way, right? I think that um, there's an indirect threat, and furthermore, I mean, I'm willing to come some distance toward you in the sense of saying that when the indirectness of the threat becomes so focused on a particularly unique agent within society, that is, your bone marrow is so uniquely fitted for this particular job, right? Then it's possible to consider, what is a society we have a right to expect of people who've entered into our kind of social contract. I don't know if that's the right word in this case.
Right.
I'm not really a contractarian, but you get the idea, right? But yeah, so I mean,
so it does seem as if you're contesting, right? Because Thompson's argument is surely we'd say you have a right to unplug yourself. Therefore, this follows from abortion as well. And your argument seems to be, I'm not sure that surely should apply as equally as she says it does.
That's
right?
Yeah. So there are a
Right.
lot of points in Thompson's article where she thinks things are just obvious,
Right.
where I don't think those things are at all obvious, right? And if given enough information, some of those cases I would need to know a lot more, and it might turn out that suitably kind of specified, I would just flat disagree with her, right, on some of those cases, right? Yeah, so there are
Would you?
definitely those moments. Yeah.
So here's a question: How would you state this here? If, and this is a big if we have structured society around the premise that a person who is uniquely suited to give aid to another human being cannot be required to do it. It must always be voluntary and must be continually voluntary throughout the process. If we agree that that's the way society should be structured, would it then follow from that for abortion rights follow from that? Right? Because if your answer is yes, then it seems as if in a big way we're agreeing, right? We're agreeing that the abortion rights follow given this society structure, and we're just disagreeing on whether or not this should be society structure.
Yeah, but you're asking me to be a lawyer and not a philosopher.
No, I'm not. No, I'm asking because I want to pinpoint exactly what we're disagreeing. Are we disagreeing that abortion rights follows from a certain conception of bodily autonomy, or we're disagreeing on the conception of bodily autonomy, which is not directly related to abortion, right? It's a larger question.
I guess I'm not sure, because it seems to me that we can talk about autonomy, and we can talk about what it's how far those considerations run,
Okay.
but it's not clear, just as Thompson says, right, that sure you have a right to life, but what I'm asking about is how far does that right to life extend, right?
Right.
And
Exactly.
just
Right.
as that's the case, right, I want to ask, okay, fine, you have a right to bodily autonomy, but how far does that right extend?
Right.
Right, and does it extend so far that you're in a position to take direct action upon an also vulnerable party who is, let's grant for the sake of argument, a person?
Right. Right.
Right, and I'm not convinced that's the case.
And I mean, I think the reason I am convinced is the case is because I think the consequences of giving aid to that person can be permanent and dire for the person giving the aid. Now,
Sure.
I'm not going to go on record and say like, well, what about women who die from pregnancy? Well, I mean, yeah, there are some that do, but it's and actually the maternal mortality rate has risen in the past few years, right? But I'm not going to say it's common enough for it to be like it's not, right? Most women survive, and in the United States of America, survive childbirth. Okay, so I'm not going to say it's always about life or death. But I will say most women who go through childbirth suffer permanent physical harm in some sense. I did with my two girls, and I think a lot of women do. Some are worse than others, but it happens very often. And so I think it's not just bodily autonomy. It's not just, well, how far does bodily autonomy extend? I think I'm comfortable with saying it extends so far as the fact that if you're putting yourself in a position where you will be permanently negatively, physically, and sometimes perhaps mentally or emotionally affected by this donor relationship, the decision to whether or not to be permanently, physically, mentally, and emotionally affected is yours and yours alone, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a thoughtful explanation of why you hold the position you hold.
Right.
but but I think what it recognizes is that uh, in this case, the woman's right to bodily autonomy does in fact extend so far that it is in a position to, um, you know, allow her to take direct action against the fetus, a non-viable, right, fetus, right, and end that relationship of dependency at any moment in which that relationship is established. And I'm just not convinced that the right to bodily autonomy extends that far. And I think that sometimes one person's modus ponens is another person's
Right.
modus
That's right.
ponens, right? I
That's right.
mean,
Right. Right. I was
and
actually thinking just that.
yeah, and I think at this point that you take Thompson's argument that says you're right, we're sure you have a right to life, but it doesn't extend this far, right? And I take sure you have a right to bodily autonomy, but
But
how
it
far
doesn't
exactly
extend.
does it
Right.
extend, right? And I don't think it extends so far as to allow you to allow you to take a positive direct action against another person, right? You know, and that person is vulnerable, and so is the mother, and that's absolutely the case. And this is a very unique relationship, and there's
Right.
just really no other relationship like it.
No, I
But at
agreed.
the same
Totally
time,
agree.
I'm just not persuaded that, uh, you know, um, you know, we're in a position to take direct action against the fetus in this manner. So.
And see, this is interesting though, because it does feel like we've argued down to like I don't even know what the right word is. Are we like intuition? And I don't know. I don't know what the right word is, right? Because I feel that I don't not feel your pull.
Mhm.
You know, that's something that if I committed myself that if I was going to go on record and defend this perspective, I was going to do it as I was going to look at the ugliness of it, and I did that. I looked at all these. I looked at pictures of aborted fetuses. I looked at videos of abortion, and I was appalled. I'm not going to lie and say that I was not appalled, and I cried, and it's hard to watch. And so I get that intuition. I do. But then I step back and I look at like, can the continent, can I universalize this? Can I make it so that not just women, but that anybody would be compelled by law, by state, whatever, to do these things? And yeah, my intuition pulls me over to like I just can't I can't be okay with that kind of society. But I can understand why you can't be okay with the society that we have. I mean, I get that. Um,
And I mean, go
and
ahead.
that's why, and this is something that I think you and I can come together on. I think the abortion decision impulsive, and I've gotten in trouble for saying that, but I have no problem saying that, and I'll go on record saying it now, right? Having an abortion because what's the example I give in the book? Because the fetus has a cosmetic defect is a really bad reason to have an abortion, right? Really, really, really bad. Like,
And here's another bad reason to have an abortion, namely that you don't like the set of
yeah,
the
I
fetus,
agree. I
right?
agree. I completely agree with that. And I've actually gone so far as to think in my personal life, I'm not ready to defend this on paper, that I have a problem with destroying embryos for that reason too, right? So like I would never, in my search to have a male child, I would never, even if I had the money, do IVF because I could not. I don't think I would feel bad destroying female embryos, right? Why do I have an argument for that? Not yet. Right now, it's at issue of emotions, right? But um, I do think that there should be reverence for human life even at the earliest stages. I do agree with the pro-life side on that. Right?
Can I just throw one thing on the fire here? And I mean, one thing I might want to say, just sort of philosophically, to kind of say, well, it might be merely a matter of differing intuitions, but actually, I don't think it's just a matter of differing intuitions because I think that you and I have some things we would want to say about why we end up on the sides, philosophically that we do. And one of the things that I'd want to say is that I don't think that it's merely a case of having differing intuitions. I think it can also be understood as being kind of non-consequentialist about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you are a flat-footed consequentialist or anything like that, but I'm a pretty hard-boiled non-consequentialist, right? And which is to say that taking an action that I take to be direct upon another human person, right? And again, I think the fetus is a person, right? So given that that's the case, taking an action directly against the life of another human person is something that I regard as, sort of non-consequentially impermissible, right? And that's part of what gets me into this particular,
Right.
sure, bind, right? I guess, but everybody's got a certain bind, right? That some thought takes us down a particular rabbit hole, and sometimes we bite a bullet here or there, right?
Right. Right.
And but bullets have flavors, and this one, because I'm sort of a fairly resolute non-consequentialist, I tend to
Yeah.
think this one's the right one to bite, right?
So like I will say that I don't consider myself a consequentialist, right?
Mhm.
Um, I however I will also admit that the second prong of the reason I'm pro-choice is consequentialist, right? In that practically speaking, I don't think it's effective to outlaw abortion, right? Um,
Mhm.
but but I don't think that I have to appeal to consequentialism for that. My main reason that I side with the woman on this issue is Kantian. I don't see how compelling pregnancy would not be a violation of the categorical imperative onto her. And in this sense, maybe again, I do have sympathies with the view that fetuses are persons. I do. But here's where my Kantian non-personhood fetus side comes out, right? I do think it's clear that she's a rational agent with goals of which this affects, right? And not listening and violating her body, violating her goals, violating her decisions, violating her autonomy in a way that doesn't apply to an embryo or a fetus, right? Because although there's been a lot of debate on this, you can at least feasibly argue that fetuses aren't Kantian persons, right? Again, that's been argued, but there are a lot of people that argue that they're not Kantian persons, right? Um, and so I don't see how compelling, when I say compelling pregnancy, I mean making a woman continue to be pregnant when she doesn't want to, right? Would not violate the same categorical imperative against her, and in a very severe way.
Yeah, and I think one of the thing, another way in which we might differ philosophically and not simply at the level of intuition might be the way that we sort of think of things kind of in terms of action theory, right? So I might see a particular discrete action, right, against the fetus, whereas you might see kind of this long voluntary assuming, right, of that dependency relationship, or something like that.
Right.
So and again, right? I think you might want to emphasize the formula of humanity, the second formulation of the categorical imperative as it pertains to the woman, and I might want to emphasize how I see it as pertaining to the fetus, right? And I don't know. There are we do differ, right? And it's kind of nice that we agree, we know where we differ, right? And we just do, we think that
Do you
that
think this is a side issue, so it's not something we probably have a lot of time to get into? Do you think that just based on Kant's literature, that there's more reason to assign personhood to a grown woman than to an embryo? Just a Kantian personhood, a Kantian conception of personhood, a rational, autonomous being, so on and so forth. And this isn't something that I'm just curious to know what you think, because there's been a lot of literature written on this, right? So like I know Alan Wood would say no, right? Kantian personhood doesn't apply to fetuses, maybe symbolically but not directly. Whereas Pat Kane thinks it does, right?
Okay.
Um,
Well, I mean, I just can't, assume the mantle. I can't sort of take on the burden of entering a
no, that's
literature
fine.
that I just don't know.
No, I just
But
want to know what you thought. I just want to know what
but
you thought about the debate.
but yeah, I mean, I do think that we're gonna bring different considerations to bear on what we think will constitute a person, right? I mean, some pro-choice advocates appeal to a particular view of the person, right? I mean, some are explicit about their debt to Locke, say, when it comes to
Right.
personhood and consciousness and all of that. And that's fine. I think that's not the best way to construe
That's fine.
personhood.
No, that's fine. That's fair.
And
And I mean, I want to go on record as saying that although I don't think fetuses would count as Kantian persons, I also don't think the Kantian conception of person is the end all and be all of personhood, right?
mhm.
So I know that was a side issue. I just want to know what you thought about that debate. It was that.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, can I actually ask you to talk a little bit about something?
I can try.
Because one of the stereotypes, and I think I'm grateful that you've given me a forum to say, here's someone that has pro-choice, that is pro-choice, but has a lot of sympathy towards a lot of pro-life concerns, right? Because I think that there's a lot of caricature of these positions.
Mhm.
And I want, one of the reasons I like talking to you is that I think you defy a lot of the caricatures of the pro-life position. And I want you to have an opportunity to break those stereotypes, right? Because at least my students, and I hear a lot of people that are pro-choice will hear things like people that are pro-life only care about fetuses, but once the baby's born, they don't care to help the baby. They don't care about and they're thinking about these stereotypical politicians that claim to be pro-life and then are cutting all these welfare programs and so on and so forth. So it's I don't want to say that it's rare that it exists, but it's rare that you hear in the media and the public forum people that are pro-life, but at the same time also push towards social justice issues.
Mhm.
Those tend to be dichotomized in the media and in popular culture, and I know that you break that dichotomy. So I wanted you to have a forum to talk about that.
Well, that's kind of you. I think. Well, it's nice of you to engage in this with me too. But uh, yeah, I guess all I'd want to say is just that uh, we use these terms like pro-life and pro-choice, and I think that largely that seems to be motivated by a desire to fit terms on bumper stickers and things like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
And I think that's to a large extent unhelpful, and I think that it might be one of the perils of having a sort of bicameral system, but it's really frustrating for me, right? To have to come to grips with uh, two sort of sides of a political spectrum that I think don't really take this kind of pro-life message to heart, right? I mean, I think that you should be in fact, you should be concerned for the poor, the sick, the vulnerable, the lonely, the disenfranchised, and all of these kinds of things because you're pro-life, right? And the fact that the fetus is in a condition of dependency is just one more accidental feature about a person that shouldn't determine how much society cares about her, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it's important for people who want to call themselves pro-life to be willing to think deeply about how far that gets them committed, and I mean, I'm certainly willing to own and confess all the ways in which I fail on a daily basis to be, pro-life. But at the same time, I think it's important to kind of drill down and see what a consistent opposition to abortion rights would really require us to assume as a society. And I think it's a good deal different than either party seems to want to tell us.
I
Um,
totally agree.
and yeah, so so that I think is definitely the case. For instance, I think the death penalty, right? Racial injustice and these kinds of things. There's a whole spectrum of ways of talking about how we treat the poor and things like this that I think people who want to lay claim to being pro-life should find a way to talk about that. And this is true for whether someone anybody who wants to lay claim to being pro-life, right, should find a way to talk about those things in a way that is compassionate and consistent and coherent with their other commitments. Um, on the other side of the aisle, I think if there are some of those concerns that people have for the peculiar kind of features of a person's existence, their economic status, and so forth that you want to have, then I'd be interested in talking about why a condition of dependency isn't one of those.
That's fair. No, that's fair.
So,
I mean, I'd like to think that this is an area that the pro-life and pro-choice side can have a good dialogue on, in a sense, work together. I don't think anyone that's pro-choice celebrates abortions, right? And I think that we're all in a position that we want to try to, as much as possible, to prevent them, right? Either by preventing sexual violence towards women, by preventing the social poverty conditions that make women feel that this is their only choice, or this perceptive. I'm in a position now that if I were to get pregnant unexpectedly now, it's fine. A few years ago, I would have panicked. Because in my mind that spells the end of everything. Because I do think we do live in a society where it forces women to choose between productive motherhood and productive other social roles, and to move towards a society where we don't have to worry about those things anymore. And I like to think that this is where we could, pro-life and pro-choice side, could have a more productive dialogue, right? What can we do to structure society so that abortions become less prevalent? At the very least. And of course, we're ultimately going to disagree about whether or not they should happen at all, right? But you can't do everything, right? So I just kind of sad that I'm kind of sad that we don't have this discussion more, because I think that's where some actual change can happen. Right? Do you think it's possible for pro-life and pro-choice side to work together in those respects, or?
Well, I mean, it's hard to assess the situation across the board on things like that, but it does seem to me that if there could be a little less sort of, I don't know, that I think sometimes partisanism can stand in the way of productive dialogue, right? And wouldn't it be nice if we could really try to think through these things, and again, right, we're not going to, you and I know enough about each other now that we're just not going to switch sides, certainly not overnight, right? It's just, we know where we disagree, right? But if those who favor abortion rights want to say, no, we want to lay claim to being pro-life. Okay, well, let's talk about what that would look like, and let's have all those impalements out on the floor, right? And let's have that metaphysical conversation, and let's do that philosophy,
that's fair.
Right?
No, that's fair.
Because yes, we like to we like to sort of say, talk about politics as if we could do it without philosophy, and that's of course nonsense.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
But certainly it's true on the other side that we should say, okay, we want to be pro-life, and we want to be concerned about unborn children and all of that, right? But we just can't be concerned about unborn children if we're not also concerned about the circumstances into which they're brought, right? And so, yeah.
Okay, can we end this then by agreeing that at least our conversation illustrates how absolutely important it is to have a much wider role for philosophy in practical life? Excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent.
Definitely.
So, thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Bertha. It was a lot of fun. So,
Yeah. Say hi to Melissa and the kids.
yeah. Say hi
All
to
right.
Thomas and likewise. So,
All
kids.
right.
All right, take care.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.